Roger that.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
It says.
Hello, everyone. It's Victoria here from Bagida'waad. We're happy to have you with us tonight. And we've got some exciting guests with us coming all the way from up north, although she's normally close by in Port Elgin, where I was today, actually. I was actually at a playground near your house today, Mandy and Bailey.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But my good friends, Mandy Hutter and her daughter Maylee might pop in occasionally in the background, and another friend Kathy may pop in the background occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Natasha here. Natasha and I are both with the Bagida'waad Alliance, and we're happy to have a good conversation with Mandy here tonight, primarily around ecosystem services, but we kind of talk about lots of different things wherever the conversation goes, whenever we're having these events. So we're going to try to keep track if people have questions or they want to be able to chat. Anyway, Mandy and I met a long time ago. Actually, have no idea when it was that we first met, but we've worked together on lots of projects, including the forest garden at Saugeen First Nation, and that was the most intense one, I think.
Yeah.
And Fairy Lake in Southampton, and the Little Port Elgin Creek at Nashingaming, and just over the years there's been many projects. So I'm really excited to have you here chatting with us tonight. And I know what you do is really important and not very understood by a lot of people, because it's kind of like a combination of science and math and physics and technology and Indigenous diplomacy, and there's just so many aspects of things that need to go together in one beautiful package that you can do, Mandy. I really admire your ability to do all of those things at one time. So we're really happy to have you here. So I am going to turn it over to you, and then I'll pipe in every once in a while to keep you laughing.
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Thanks for the kind introduction. Maylee is here. She is my main helper on site. She is on a 2-week trip, take your kid to school, take your kid to work trip with mommy while we're up north doing some work. And so just a big thank you to you guys for having me in today. It's always great to share a little bit about some of the work that we do. So a little further bit of an intro about myself. I was born up in the Ottawa Valley, and we moved when I was about 3 years old to Saugeen Shores, and I've been there almost ever since, but I've spent quite a number of years doing work in other countries and across Canada, predominantly within the environmental field. And one of the things that really unites my work is food security issues. So a quick little note about the work that I do. I do work in ecosystem services, and that's the company called Green Feet Ecosystem Services. Green feet because I always really like the idea of stepping very lightly on the ground. And there was this great concept called the carbon footprint that I work into some of the work that we do. But we kept the name Green Feet, and then Ecosystem Services. We focus on restoration, protection, and enjoyment of ecosystem services. So we're going to kind of steer things through this little talk to the enjoyment part of those ecosystem services. And I'm really going to steer the enjoyment part around wild foraging a little bit. And that's why we have a picture of little heads in the background. So in my work, we have these 3 different services that we do. We do aerial imagery and analysis, we do project support, and then we do seasonal services. And in those seasonal services, we do a lot of wild foraging. The reason for that is because it's really difficult. I've always found in a lot of the work that I've done is that it's really difficult for people to understand the importance of protection and restoration if they don't have something, you know, in their hands to kind of hold. And as we all know, environments take a really, really long time to regrow. And lots of times we're starting from bare fields. And, you know, when you plant plants and they're not, you know, they take a year, 5 years, 10 years, sometimes a lot, sometimes even longer to start actually producing food. So for wild foraging that we do, not only our family has history in doing this, but it became a really great tool to really connect people to the work that we do in a very real way. So we do, we pick, there's four main foods that we pick, and then I'll get into each one of those. Fiddleheads, leeks, apples, and wild rice are four of the main ones that we do, and there's a different purpose for each one of them. But we do a lot of other kinds of foods like berries and things like that we process, and then we get them out to different people. We're bringing them out to markets this year, and we bring them out to restaurants, but always around education. It's always a tool for education for us, because there's this wonderful lust that a lot of folks have right now for wild foraging, and that is so wonderful. It's also really dangerous because you can over harvest things, and I think some of you guys have probably seen this very often. So because our work is in restoration and protection, we have kind of a diligence. We try to be really diligent about educating as much as possible about sustainable harvesting methods for everything that we pick and everything that we're involved with. We do so we've done, so for myself, my family's done foraging ever since I was a really little girl, and it's not just me, however, and the traditions that are passed down through my family for doing foraging. Because of my work, I've been really involved with a lot of really wonderful people and really knowledgeable people, a lot more knowledgeable than myself too, about foraged foods. So in doing wild foraged foods, you can never say you're an expert, right? It's a very humbling activity to do, because you're constantly going to be learning. You're constantly going to be coming into new environments where, wait a minute, I thought these kinds of plants only grew over here, but here they are here. So there's such a wonderful thing about doing foraged foods that helps to kind of keep you humble and help to just teach you about how eccentric Mother Nature is. So I'm going to get into kind of the timelines for some foods. So we have different seasons for wild foraged foods, and in every region of Ontario, foraged foods come at very different seasons. So as Victoria had noted, I'm up north here right now, and up north, the furthest north that we see fiddleheads growing is probably about New Liskeard area, if you're really pushing it. And then after that, you really don't see them much at all. But right now in the spring, fiddleheads are in season. And right down south where you are, Natasha and Victoria, in Saugeen Shores, fiddleheads, it's the season for them right now. So what we've done every single year, we go out, we pick them, and we pick them by pre-order, because we like to make sure that we're not picking too many. And we also have to be very mindful at all times when we're picking about marking the areas that we pick, so we're not over picking in future years. And the capacity of the patches of whatever it is that we're picking. So for fiddleheads, one of the important things for fiddleheads is how it grows. It's really important to know the plant that you're picking intimately as you can. There's Maley here. Maley knows fiddleheads very well, so she's been out picking all these different foods for about this will be your 7th year out picking foods. So for fiddleheads in particular, they come up in the spring, and they're like these little mounds that just sit in wetter areas. We find them in areas called riparian zones really often, and that's kind of by creek beds or marshy areas we find them in. and they grow these big mounds. You'll be walking through the bushes, and then all of a sudden you'll kind of trip or slip over this mound. It's not a mound of grass. Sometimes it's a mound of fiddleheads that are just kind of hiding underneath their casts. And you'll take a bigger look around, and you'll see thousands and thousands of them, and you can tell they're fiddleheads because you can see the stalks from the previous year that are lying dead across the ground. So every year that it dies, those dead leaves sort of bend over, they die, but they form a larger mound. So those, you can always tell the age of a fiddlehead plant by how large those mounds are. And you can actually get in there and count them if you have a really clean area, and usually in areas where you have a lot of, high water runoff and then low water runoff, it actually washes a lot of that dirt away, and you can actually see it sort of looks like a pineapple on the outside when it's really clean. And those layers happen every single year. It'll put on a new layer just like a tree. So in these big mounds, we always stress that you never, for any kind of wild food or wild harvested medicine or anything like that, you never pick about any more than about 10%. So 1 out of every 10 you leave behind. And that's just a sort of a standard safety for any kind of wild foods. And it's especially true for fiddleheads. You only want to pick at a 1/10 of the balls that are within any patch, right? So the 90% of them, you're actually going to leave them totally alone. That helps them to grow back. But another important thing for fiddleheads in particular is that you never take any more than 2 fronds off of that bulb. So fronds, what is that? What is a frond? The frond of ferns, you know how they grow big and they're just like big fans? Before they get to be big fans, they actually start off like little curled pieces. You can see in the background there. They're all tightly wound up, and that's the actual fiddlehead. That's what's used for fiddleheads, and that's what's cut off at about 2 inches when it's still nice and tightly curled before any bugs and stuff can get in there. It's cut off, and that's what's cooked up, and it tastes kind of like asparagus. So they grow really, really fast because they have huge leaves on them. So we find that the fiddlehead season only runs for about 2 weeks, and then it's done. So as soon as you start seeing those little casks become uncovered, so the casks are like that brown skin on top of those big mounds that cover up the tops of the fiddleheads. As soon as you start seeing that come off, you've got about 2 weeks to pick them. Otherwise, they'll unfurl too much, and then they're not fiddleheads anymore, and then they're ferns. So it's always the ostrich fern that's used for fiddleheads as well. And we really like fiddleheads because they're one of the reasons why we really like working with fiddleheads is because they're a very beautiful species. They're a wonderful plant. Ostrich ferns can get about as tall as you are, and they start off very, very small, right? And they're very tasty too, and they're quite easy to pick. And Maylee really likes fiddleheads too, really. And they're easy to pickle, they're easy to work with, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. But cooking them, there's some people will get stomach aches and things like that from them. But yeah, so for these beautiful species, it's really easy to draw people's attention to these wonderful, wonderful things that grow in the middle of forests, or in wetter areas in the middles of forests, or at the edges of creeks, or by riverbanks and things like that, where we usually find them. For farmers that we work with, we've done a lot of site inspections, and that's usually one of the first things that we see is that there's hey, look at your ferns. Those are actually fiddleheads. You can eat those. And once they realize you can eat something from your forest, wow, maybe we can turn their attention towards protecting those areas. So fiddleheads also grow on a 4-year cycle. So if you cut every single one of those fronds off at the top, 4 years, the next year's growth is going to be really, really affected. They're going to grow a lot skinnier And then through those 4 years, it's going to take 4 years to recuperate that energy for the plant to grow back up again. So it's yeah, so every plant has all these really unique kinds of things about them. As well, what's available right now is morels, and morels have a completely different attitude, totally different characters. Every plant has kind of different attitudes and characters and stuff like that about them. Morels, they're super high sought after. They really love them. We only ever do morels through honorariums by going out with folks and picking them, and then we do honorariums with them. So we don't actually sell them. We just become kind of like a middleman for them, but we get out and we pick them every year. Some people can see them really, really well in the bush when they're walking through, like Maley here. I can't though. They're really, really well camouflaged. They look kind of like a little brain, and morels are one of the tastiest kind of a mushroom in the entire area. There is a false morel that's out there, so you always want to be really careful around mushrooms about correct identification. But morels have a really, really specific, and not a lot of people know this, and everybody thinks that they know where morels grow, but this tip about morels is the be all and end all piece of advice about where to find morels. Morels grow wherever they want to, and that's it. As long as you understand that, then you'll be able to find morels. they are.
So you'll look everywhere.
You can look everywhere. There's always there's a lot of culture around every kind of wild foods, and that's really great for me to see and talk and listen to people's stories about wild foods, because everybody has stories about them, and morels is definitely no exception, because everybody has different stories about morels, and the best stories about exactly how to find them and where they grow best, which conflicts with every single other story that I've heard. So morels grow best wherever they want to. But you will have spores. Areas that are colonized and picked more often, I do find that there's more, the more that they're picked, the more that we see them growing, just because people are walking through, spreading spores with their feet. For any kinds of mushrooms, I really always encourage folks to have like a mesh bag that you're picking them with, because as you're carrying them, it'll drop all the spores around. And you can inoculate areas. Inoculate just means that you kind of you prep an area for growing a particular thing. You can inoculate areas with morels, but the success is probably totally random. And I've never really seen 100% success for inoculation about morels. So try it, walk around a lot, but you have to keep a really close eye on them, because they are very independent species. So we really like them. And they always come out when fiddleheads come out as well. So usually, okay, all right, that's fine. There you go. Sorry, just opening a water bottle. Oh, sorry. There you go. Perfect. Sorry. We have a water bottle that we're doing here. So I forget what I was going to say. So lots of times, because foraged foods are they're one of the most recognizable kind of an ecosystem service that comes from these environments, and that's foods. Nutrition for consumption is a kind of an ecosystem service that really makes ecosystem services real for people. But what they also do, a lot of these foraged foods have many other different kinds of services that they provide. Like ferns are really great filters for environments. morels and mushrooms and fungi are really great indicators of areas that are old and moist, and they help to transfer to okay. Mushrooms grow on these mycelium networks under the soil. Their spores are dropped, but those mycelium networks under the soil are established after long periods of time, without having any disturbance like fire or fire or digging or tilling or anything like that. You can actually break these mycelial networks. So oftentimes mushrooms are really great indicators of what's the word for it? At times climax forests because they occupy the undergrowth, but they indicate a just general health in different kinds of ecosystems by having that intact mycelial network underground, which actually that mycelial network, which actually helps the plants to communicate and helps to transfer nutrients, because you'll have there's a lot of soil chemistry that they represent great health of in these environments. So there's all these different functions that these plants provide for us out in these bushes. But the really neat thing about all these different plants is that there's virtually no limit to recognizing these once you start looking for them. And once you start learning more about what ecosystem services are and how people are connected to them, you realize just how connected you are to these environments. So there's there's every different kind of a species that people get into pick. I always really recommend linking up with somebody that really knows and has that history with those species, not necessarily like Maylee, she says, just like Maylee. Yeah, she knows. It's very different having somebody to teach you by hand or teach you in person rather than sort of Googling it and looking at a book, because when you're out live with the person and out on the land, they'll show you all those different things about the environments that they're growing in, that if you're watching a YouTube video of someone down in California, it's a very different environment, right? You can learn things, and it's really great, really great to listen and learn. But always, if you're just starting to get out to do foraged foods and start to learn about these plants and learn about those ecosystems, make sure you have somebody to go out and explain them a little bit to you. It just helps to give a little bit more respect when you're picking to learn more about what you're picking. It's kind of like finding its name and then finding a little bit about the history of a person before you can say that you're that you're their friend or something like that, right? But I always really encourage people to find their own relationship with foraged foods, because you'll definitely have your butt handed to you if you start over picking. I have a video series called the F Word series that we've started creating. we for fiddleheads and foraging, right? They're all F words. But I really give people, I really make it clear that we like to really make sure that you're how you can avoid over harvesting these different areas, because you can absolutely devastate populations of leeks and fiddleheads and berries and things like that. Chaga, a lot of folks have been getting into a lot of foraged foods recently as people start to learn more. We've actually seen a number of different areas that have been over harvested, and so I'll steer the conversation around a little bit more to talk a little bit about over harvesting. In that pursuit to find that connection for wild foods and have these wonderful exotic things that are free from nature, there's something called exploitation that can happen. And there's a habit that people will get into when they're picking foods. And it's the same thing if you're tree planters in Northern Ontario used to have this happen all the time, where they would plant thousands and thousands of trees every day, and then they would leave the field and they would still see places everywhere that they could plant trees. You can't turn it off. You just get into that, it's kind of like a brain worm that gets in. When you're picking, the same thing happens. You'll start picking and you'll see more and you want to pick them, and then you see more and you want to pick them. It's really, really easy to fall victim to sort of a harvesting greed that happens, and you stop recognizing, that 10%, leave 9 out of every 10 alone. You leave that 90% alone, or, don't pick any more than 2. Well, maybe I'll just pick like 4 off of this one because they're really big, and that's okay because there's more. Just take a step back when you start really picking. There is such a huge risk of over harvesting, and that's the last thing that you want to do, because you're not going to have it for next year, right? You always want to make sure you're protecting those areas for future growth. Ecosystems change. They change on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, on a decade basis. But you don't want to be the agent that's driving and forcing that change, because it's happening too quickly. So oftentimes a lot of animals depend on foods that you're picking, right? Berries. We usually go out once the blueberries are ready up in Northern Ontario, the blackberries are ready in Southern Ontario, and we always kind of we get out and we do berry picking often. But what also likes berries? Birds, right? So everybody, you want to get out there and you want to pick all the berries that before the birds get to them, but always leave some for the birds, right? Those birds are spreading the seeds, and those birds are when they're dropping their waste, they're helping to refertilize those areas, right? You always want to be, and that's why we want to learn more about those environments too. When you go out with somebody who knows those ecosystems, they can tell you, for this wild rice, we see a lot of wren that are in these marshes, and they really like to eat this wild rice, and so do these fish, and so do these fish. It just helps you to kind of recognize your limitations in your place in helping to pick in a balanced way. So watch out for that demon sitting on your shoulder that's saying, keep picking, just keep picking. We have so much, we can share them with these people and these people, these people. That's why we always do, when we head out, we always do our work by pre-order. So we know how much we're going to be picking, and then we can kind of plan out how the areas that we're going to be heading to, and we're not tempted by any kind of over harvesting. When we educate people every year when we head out to do these different species that we like to use. One of the species in particular that I really like to bring up, especially when we're talking about both ecosystem services and wild foraged foods, is wild rice. And Victoria and Natasha have had a lot of awesome experience last year with a project using wild rice to help out with rebuilding an ecosystem for fish. So wild rice, of course, is a food. It's a traditional food, and it has its own spirit. And we always try to be really mindful of that spirit, because for one, there's no way that that wild rice can be picked by motorboat, which is wonderful. It's a very humbling plant, because you can only really pick it by canoe, because as soon as you get on the water with a motorboat, it shakes the water too much and shakes the seeds away, which is great. Whereas when you're traveling by canoe, which is what you have to, you go a lot gentler traveling into those areas. Now, green feet, we don't necessarily pick it as a food. We actually pick it for helping to spread wild rice around, and helping to rehabilitate areas for fish, because we find that it's a great keystone species for building up ecosystems, especially ecosystems that have been damaged, and ecosystems that are kind of struggling. Wild rice is something that is wonderful for both birds, but it's wonderful for fish, it's wonderful for mammals. And when you have a patch of wild rice, you see a lot of thriving animal communities in that area, and that really helps to build up the diversity in these ecosystems. It also creates sediments that are great for holding on to nutrients for fish to eat, and for benthics, little tiny creatures underneath the soil. They like to live in there, which is great food for fish. The fish will go in and they'll eat those little benthics, and then they'll knock off rice. And it also helps to create habitat, kind of like mangrove systems create habitat for shrimp. Wild rice is really great habitat. We've seen a lot of areas for where pickerel like to swim in and around wild rice areas, pickerel, trout, and we started seeing some areas with pike up, but that's in Northern Ontario. We don't get those in Southern Ontario. But for trout, yeah, we see them in some of the areas that we have wild rice. So it's a really great species that for us, we don't necessarily pick it for food. We use it really strictly for rebuilding ecosystems. And we've had lots of folks out with us to share in this wonderful experience that it is to pick wild rice. And we've given out, dollars don't come, we can't sell wild rice. We don't sell, because putting that dollar value on something that has a spirit is not what we do. Our work is in protection and restoration. So we give out a lot of wild rice to folks that are trying to rehabilitate ponds and creek beds and systems. Victoria and Natasha did a really great project. Rashawn came out with us last year, and we spread wild rice everywhere. And Sean has some wicked awesome ideas about more spots that we want to bring it to. And there's no harm in that. It's quite a gentle species. We don't necessarily see it taking over any areas. You know, if there's other plants that grow in and amongst it, then it's quite accommodating. So it's a great species to use that we like to work with a lot. And yeah, we're always happy for other folks to come out with us. And we do it every year, and this will be Maley's 7th year going out and doing wild rice, which is a lot of fun. Patches, you can always tell the ages of patches by how solid the ground is, because every year it'll dump rice, and it'll collect debris, it'll collect sediments and things like that. And so you'll have this very soft layer of soil between where the roots actually are. The roots actually just grow in this very soft layer of soil, nothing solid, just soft. But you can actually stick your arm down or stick your leg down. If you fall out of the canoe, you won't find any solid ground in some of these older patches. I know, because that's happened. But the age of these patches can always be told by how deep this soft layer of sediment is. And some of the patches, one down in Saugeen Shores is, it's easily about 10 feet deep, and we still haven't found the bottom of it yet. So if every year you get about a centimeter of debris on that it'll collect, that's a very, very old patch. And so we really like to draw people's attention to this, because we should protect these areas. They've thrived for much longer than we've been around. So we always go and make sure that as we're out there, we're thankful of picking it. And we're for myself, for us, we always put little piles of nuts down for little animals to be eating, to be snacking on, little peanuts or something like that. Some folks that we've been out with, laying down sama, making sure that your prayer is out there. And that's a really important thing that we really encourage people to do, because you're when you're out foraging for different things, you're taking something, and it's always good to give something back. And so for us, we like to give back by doing rehabilitation work, and for other folks, it's putting down a pile of nuts or something like that, or planting a tree or something. But it's always great to give back when you've taken something. And if just giving back is just, you know, turning and saying thank you to a patch, then that's better than nothing, right? So I will probably I will open it up maybe for questions or anything like that, or if there's comments or questions, I can just keep talking, or but I'll be mindful of everyone's time. Yeah.
Well, in the chat, Annette was saying that it was really interesting.
Oh yeah.
So you're getting positive feedback
Thanks.
for sure.
Oh, nice. Oh,
I can
Yeah,
actually
it's-
unmute myself because you can't see my hair with me talking. So,
oh yeah.
so that's really interesting. I didn't know that about wild rice. In fact, I didn't even know where it grew, although I've heard of it, you know, obviously. So, yeah, so thanks for that. I'm going to Google that afterwards and read a little bit more about it. So I'm from the Collingwood area, and you know, I lead hikes up on the escarpment as well. But where can I find that? I mean, I probably have seen it and don't even realize that I have.
Seen wild rice?
Yeah.
Now
Like-
I can't necessarily point you to specific areas. You just have to find somebody that wants to bring you out. But if it looks like a grass. Maybe I can pull up a picture of it. It's a grass. You'll start seeing kind of like a greening above the water if you're looking onto a lake, or if you're looking onto in a creek bed or something like that. It just looks like a grass, not a thick grass, a very thin grass, kind of like prairie grass or Canada wild rye or something like that. It'll grow, usually it'll grow in areas that are just deep enough for a canoe, conveniently.
Okay.
And it can be planted in areas that are just deep enough for a canoe, about knee height. But later on in the season, so you'll see that greening, and that's just those stalks starting to come up. Then it'll start to change color to more of a yellow color. And then you'll start to see across these lakes kind of this purpley kind of a tinge to the tops of those lakes. And that's the grains of wild rice starting to ripen. And after they start ripening, usually it's about 2 weeks. It's different every year. You can actually start picking it at the point where you start to see that reddening of them, because the stalks will kind of, I'll use Maley's spoon here as an example. They'll grow up straight, and you'll have these, they'll be straight. You'll see everything purple, and it's still tucked into the stalk there. Now, it doesn't necessarily hang out. That's a different kind of rice, but it'll just kind of start to bend itself out just a little bit. A lot of people will confuse that bending out for being the actual rice. It's actually the pollen stalks that are starting to bend out. So there'll be 2 points where it starts to bend the stalks that the rice are attached to down. And it's actually the lower stalk that has the actual rice on it. The top part will blow away, and it'll pollinate. But once you start seeing that reddening of those purple pieces, it's about that 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks that those bottom pieces of rice will be ready to start pulling out, and then dropping onto the ground.
Yeah, I can see that. I Googled a picture of it. So
okay, yeah. And it'll change.
Yeah, that looks familiar.
Yeah, now you'll start paying more attention to some of the grasses in the creeks, which is great. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So much life in there.
there is. Yeah. Big
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Can I share a
Thanks for
photo
that.
of wild rice, Mandy?
Yes.
Just so that people can see it.
Oh my gosh, of course.
Plenty Canada has a section on wild rice on their website, and they're an Indigenous led organization that I
What's
work
that
with.
organization? Sorry.
Pardon?
What's it called?
Plenty Canada. I put it in a link in the chat.
Oh,
I'll put
great.
it on,
Thank
but
you.
I'm gonna just show a picture here so that everybody can see it. But they have some really nice pictures on the website
Gorgeous.
of what it looks like. And that's Larry
Mhm.
McDermott that's in the canoe. He's an elder that out.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a nice explanation here. So if anybody wants to take a look at that sometime, they can.
And how do you say that? Manoman? What's that word?
Natasha,
And-
this one's for you.
Manuman?
We've heard it Manaman or
Ma-
Natasha. Natasha knows the pronunciation.
No, I don't.
Oh, I've heard it as Manaman or
Manaman?
Manoman. Yeah.
Okay,
Manaman,
thanks.
if you're talking fast. Usually when people are talking fast, they say Manaman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
I just said minimum.
Yeah, you did. Good job.
I said minimum.
Yeah. My little rice picker right here with me. Yeah. She was just out doing a native plant rescue in one of the sites that we work on up in northern Ontario for what's called skunk currant, which we found out in the bush. But we have to only transplant it to areas in northern Ontario. But it grows everywhere. It'll grow anywhere, but it's a skunk currant it's a currant, of course. But it grows by long stalks rather than in the clump, kind of like a trailing currant, but it usually grows in wetlands rather than on like fields or gardens and things like that. It really likes wet areas. So she was out helping us to transplant and rescue those plants and yeah, and then move them along. We tried to do a video of her pointing out how to identify skunk currant, right? Oh, totally.
The one plant that you planted at the Creek Project, Mandy, which is always interesting. Oh, it's interesting to me is that Jerusalem artichoke.
Mm.
Could you tell me a little bit more? Because I just love the flowers, but
Oh,
how
yeah.
enormous they are. Like they're just amazing for the pictures that you can take with them.
Yeah.
But I also know that they're food. But
Yeah. And it's so, all right. Jerusalem artichoke has a funny history here in Canada because at this point in time, we have two different varieties. There's a Chinese variety, then there's a naturalized variety in our region. And a lot of times you'll see big Jerusalem artichokes that have huge, so Jerusalem artichokes have this huge, big sunflower-like flower. It's massive, like as big as my head sometimes.
Oh, that's
And they have
big.
these big balls on the bottom of them that are kind of like a potato. They're like a really starchy potato and they're really tasty when you cook them with maple syrup. Man, they're really good. And lots of butter, of course, too. But they have all these little nubby knobs on them. So you really got to be like dedicated to the cause of prepping them because they're really hard to peel. But they're absolutely delicious, really starchy. So a lot of folks say that they're, high on glycemic index, so great for diabetics and things like that. Same thing as burdock root. But there's these two different varieties, and the bigger one, which we're seeing a lot of in a lot of the areas that we work with, is actually this Chinese variety. But there is a native variety too, which has really skinny, long. It's kind of like, it's only about the size of my finger at times, right? So you got to be even more dedicated to the cause for picking these. And that's the one that's on your site, is these skinny little ones. And you actually see that once you start to get to know the plant, you'll start seeing them everywhere. And these big, beautiful, gorgeous yellow clumps of flowers on these tall stalks that are almost about as tall as you are. And those are, if you dig up the roots, the root balls on them, that's a Jerusalem artichoke. You can cook it up and fry it up. The little ones, you don't even have to peel it. It's you just cook them up in butter, and they're quite yummy. They grow
Or,
at
or
about,
eat them raw.
or
which
eat
is
them
what
raw.
I love
Yeah.
to do.
Oh
Just
yeah.
pick them and eat them right there.
Yeah. But they spread fast. They spread really, really fast. Every one of those little nubs will grow into about 10 more. So they'll make a very dense patch very quickly, which is really, really nice. For doing like wind buffers and things like that. They're really nice for, oh, it says Tracy. Just 1 second. Yeah, Tracy. She's finding out the name of her zebra that she just got. So, yeah. So they're really great for sort of initially blocking wind, because they get really, really tall. And they form, they're great to get in there and dig up. You don't have to worry about hurting them at all, but they'll self-limit themselves, right? Like they'll exhaust themselves in a patch. It'll get so dense that it can't send out any more root clump, what are they called? Root balls. The name is escaping me. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm riding right like a horse.
So many great things. And I mean, like I said, like I continuously, I learn something new every single year. We were just walking through the bush 2 days ago with a buddy of mine, and I've, she's showing me lots of new things that I didn't even know about, right? So smushing up poplar, she was smushing up poplar buds for the sap of it to identify the poplar, which I didn't know was such a strong smelling plant that's used for you can make a little salve with different things. But I don't necessarily get into making salves. I leave that for some of the medicine makers for what we work with. Mm-hmm.
What about grapevine? I know there's 2 in the area, supposedly. I'm really familiar with one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Oh.
not so familiar. I haven't seen, I might have seen the other one. I'm not too sure. Maybe.
There's the wild grapevine, and then there's Concord grapes that actually grow. They've naturalized themselves into the wild. They're much bigger grape balls on them, but it's usually the wild grapevine that has the those twirly little handles on it. They like it best where it's sunny. But a lot of folks don't necessarily like the wild grapes because it's so tart, which is what I love about them. And they have such a big seed in them. It's just a pain, but you can get a whole handful of them and just yummy, and just kind of suck on that and then spit out the seeds after. And then you're your own bird for transplanting them if you really, yeah. But I mean, great to eat. We make jam out of it every year, but we just make the jam out of it for our families. But we always bring, for any kind of events and things that we do, depending on the time of the year, we go out, and at any time of the year, if we're doing activities or events or presentations or things like that, though we haven't been able to do this during COVID, any time of the year, we can usually head out and pick something that's out there and share it with folks. So one of the last presentations that I did just before COVID, just when things were just starting to open up after COVID, we brought some wild grapes back in the fall there, and it was a great hit because people didn't know they could eat them, but totally edible. Don't eat too many. Your stomach's gonna fill up with you'll have diarrhea if you eat too much of them. But contrary to popular belief, if you swallow the seeds, a grapevine will not grow inside of you.
Phew. That's good to know.
Yeah.
You won't have a baby or anything?
Yeah. I love
You again.
Yeah. Yeah. But grapevine is amazing. Grapevine's a really nice one. It'll, for planting it. They can thrive really well in such, such challenging conditions that other plants find difficult to grow in. I mean, they can grow by, and you see wild grape everywhere. You can see it on, on railroad tracks, you see it on beaches, you see it on rocks, you see it on just about anywhere. And you see it on in gardens, you see it. It's such an easy species to grow and such an easy species to find. All you have to do is look for a vine and just look for the little curlicues on it. It's got little curlicues like a little pigtail. And you've got grapevine growing, and they've got these they have a really distinctive leaf on them that you can actually use for making like Hispanic. You can use the grape leaf on the grapevine that we have over here for like steaming rice or cooking, like I think they're not spanakoppitas. It's like there's Mediterranean foods that use grapes, some of the more domesticated varieties of grapes and grape leaves. But we can do the same thing over here for steaming stuff. Just some people find that the leaves are a little more a little tougher. And I mean, as always make sure that your areas are free of contamination before you start picking. Don't even get me started on cattails and that whole point about, being careful about contamination. You have to be very careful about cattails and where you pull them from, because they're a filter, and you'll eat more harmful stuff than you will do good for yourself by eating cattails, depending on where you pick it from. But there's lots to, like I said, I continue to learn, but I love getting out with folks and just showing them, just pouring out whatever I can to help folks just connect to those areas. And fingers crossed that we have great growth at the fish sites that are growing. So it'll take a while for it to mature, but all the plants look like they were doing really nicely.
Yes, they were happy plants. I was surprised to find that one. I think that's the only one that's there, is the winterberry.
Yep.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah. There should be two there. I think there was two there.
It might have been. It was one of the ones that we were just watering, and I was like, winterberry. That's.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they all have little purposes. Yeah. So many fun adventures around wild foods.
This is true. Like I said, I'm gonna have to get you up here in the fall to look at some of the elderberries, because I got a jungle.
Oh gosh. So for everyone who doesn't know, Natasha has a whole ton of elderberry plants, and we just, because you knew it was elderberry. Right?
I kind of guessed it was, but it was just the amounts. Like even this year, the spring, looking over it, going, it's a really large patch.
Yeah.
So the birds must have been really happy.
Busy. Yep. Yeah.
And it obviously must have liked the soil and where they are, because they're just, and how fast they grow. I was amazed at how fast they grow, because the pigs haven't been back there for about 2 years, but they're already taller than I am.
Oh gosh, yeah. They're they'll grow by seed and by rhizome. So they'll grow quite fast, which is no problem, because then you get more birds in there. But the more you can definitely dig them up. They won't be hurt at all. It won't hurt the patch of them. We just had so I've got a site up here that I'm experimenting with different plants on, and we had elderberries take and survive up in 14 hours north of you guys on one of the sites, and we have 2 other forest garden sites that we're working on up here, where we have more elderberries from down south that we're bringing up north to cultivate those spots. But in the first year of them, and this is why oftentimes I use really small species when we're rehabilitating areas, the entire top of the plant will die, especially if you're, it's in an area where it's unfamiliar, but then it'll start to grow up from the bottom again. It'll actually just, it'll be like, whoa, what's going on? Okay, my roots are safe. Okay, I'm gonna give up the top area and I'm just gonna start again. And usually I'll see that that's what's happening to plants that are, that they're not necessarily super happy with the areas that they're at. And that's why I always wait until the year after to make the judgment call about whether or not something's died or not, because you'll see it's still got a little bit of life left in it too. But yes, elderberry is a nice one. It's so resilient. But we had that happen the whole top of our, we had like 7-foot elderberry trees that we were bringing up here, and they died all the way down to the bottom, but then the bottom started growing up. And we had teeny tiny little elderberries, like just from the rhizome, just one little shoot coming up. And those little teeny tiny ones are, they're about a foot tall from last year. So it's, so you really have to, it's different for every different site. But
Well, I'm really glad that you don't count something out in the first couple of years, even if it's struggling.
Yeah.
I'm always one that's a little bit hopeful, saying it might come back. And then I forget about it and, go back 3 or 4 years later and saying, see,
there it is. Yeah.
there it is.
It's true. And thriving too. You'll see things just thriving. Some of the best plants that I've ever seen growing from being planted are the ones that people have completely forgotten about. Sometimes for the first year, you need care. First year or two, caring for things is good to do. But Mother Nature knows what she's doing, and it's best to leave things to the experts sometimes. We're just her little minions helping. Yeah. You'll be an elderberry minion coming up.
Well, that was really fun. I don't think you mentioned ramps or trout lilies even.
Do we want to get into those too? There's so many.
There's so many things that you can eat in the forest, and a lot of people just don't know. But when I go out, I'm always like, I can eat that, and I can eat that, and I can eat that, and I can eat that. And it's a comforting thing.
Yeah.
To know that, if you're out in the forest and you forget your snacks and you go for a walk, you can find food to eat. It's just it's a nice thing, just even on alone, that one thing is knowing, what a mulberry is, because like you can find those even in the cities, and, when in the parks and stuff, you'll come along or I used to find it down the lane from my house, people would have a mulberry tree and you just go and eat it off of the lane where, hardly anybody drives. It's just in the middle of somewhere. And, it's fun to be able to find those things and know what they are. So I'd encourage everybody to start learning more about what food is around them, because you never know when those skills might come in handy.
Mm-hmm. And you'll find yourself starting to walk a lot softer in the bush. You'll take much more mindful steps when you start looking at this stuff. You'll step on something that's really tasty and you'll go, oh no, and then you'll just walk really gently and tiptoe through the forest.
It's like for me with wild strawberries in the in the late spring, early summer. You're kind of like, oh, they're so small, but they're so yummy.
So yummy though.
Anyway, it has been an hour though, so we really are grateful for you taking the time out. And I know you've got Maylee there that probably gonna need to go to bed at some point tonight.
Oh, she's a night hog. Give her a little bit of freedom up here.
That's great. Anyway, it's always fun to chat with you, Mandy. You've got so much knowledge and a good way of sharing it. A lot of positive energy that we appreciate, and it's always fun talking and laughing with you.
Oh,
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. And yeah, you girls are a lot of fun. Had
thanks.
me laughing a few times. So thank you, Amanda. That was great.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for hanging out with us, Annette.
Well, I'd like to do I was taking a look at some of the other presentations that you do. So I was going to send a bunch of links. You have one where they're teaching the language there. I can't remember his name that's doing that.
Ron Root. Yep.
Yes, yes. But you have so many that that you do. I do courses as well. Like last night I held a bear awareness course or a presentation. So I'll be busy every night. I won't have a social life, but that's okay because I have plants. I have plants and bears and bugs
Yeah.
and slugs
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
Annette, you'd find it interesting. My mom, I probably shouldn't tell anybody how old she is, but she's over 80. She was telling me a story today about when she was little and her dad teaching her how to deal with bears. And he had my grandfather was like a mainly Irish immigrant family, but had lived in Owen Sound for a couple generations before he was born.
Oh yes.
And he grew up like working on farms and stuff. So they had to know, like he used to work on a farm near Kemble. So he was out in the rocks and lots of places where there are bears.
Absolutely.
So when he'd take the kids for a walk, my mom and her brother, he would get them to act out what you would do if there was a bear.
Oh,
And
nice.
so she said that he would get them that they need to start going really slowly and talk sternly, and to get really as big as they could and go and just go, I want you to be gone. I want you to get
It's true. That's what you do. Yeah. The bear's just trying to identify what kind of animal you are, right? So that's why you want to be bigger, right? But without being threatening, too much. You don't want to initiate an attack, but yeah, you can look pretty silly, but it does work.
We have almost a bear expert
Yeah.
up here.
The only thing is, if you see cubs,
That's
then
right.
that doesn't work. So you need to
Yeah.
actually back away very
You do.
slowly, but back completely away as quickly as you can, because that mama is going to be around definitely.
Yeah.
Except at
Yeah.
my camp, I was sleeping in the bedroom, and my husband was standing by the window, and he said to me, "So what should I do with this little bear outside your window?" And I'm
Oh,
like, "What are you
no.
talking about?" So I had a little bear, and he was just sunning himself just on the rock outside my bedroom window at my camp.
Geez.
Well, his mom, he must have lost his mom, but he's hung around my camp for at least 2-3 years. And he would just come, and we just made sure that the barbecue was cleaned off, and
Yeah.
no garbage around. You're gonna clean the fish, make sure you take your fish guts, throw it back in the
Okay.
water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All that
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
We have a lot of bears.
Yeah.
I have them in my backyard here.
Yeah.
I have bears, I have lynx.
Yeah.
Where's
Yeah.
everybody from? Like, you're up north, Amanda? Is it Amanda or
Yes.
Mandy?
Friends call me Mandy, so you're welcome to call me
Mandy,
Mandy.
okay.
So I
Good.
go back and forth different areas across Ontario to do work now, and
Okay.
grew up in Northern Ontario. We ourselves, me and my partner have a camp up in Cochrane, but about 45 minutes northwest
Okay.
of Cochrane. So we've had about 3 bear attacks on the camp in the past 3 weeks.
Oh, is that right?
For different reasons. Yeah, we've had some bear issues because they're all waking up right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Kathy's a lifelong. She's a
I have them in my backyard.
yeah.
And lynx.
Yeah.
I have lynx and bears. And I live right on the Montreal River in Elk Lake here.
Mhm.
Wow.
So, yeah, we get a lot of that up around here.
Yeah, well,
If
Campbell,
you're out camping, take your garbage, and hang it in a tree. That's
Yeah.
the best place to put it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even then, there's no guarantee that they're not
Well,
gonna,
at least they're not gonna destroy your camp.
yeah, you'll be
They'll climb
busy.
the tree and they'll steal the bag.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, they normally take
Yeah.
it away from you.
yeah, yeah.
Just drag it off.
But my best bear defense actually is sleeping on the floor here. Mila, I'll show you this wolf dog here.
Well,
Him and yeah, we've got a pack of about 4 dogs up north, and
oh, wow.
all 4 of them will go after the bears when they come into the camps. Oh, sure. Yeah, it's but yeah, good thing you're teaching bear aware camps, because they're out. They're
They
up.
are out. Yeah.
They're active now.
They've been
Yeah,
up for
well,
a while now.
Yeah.
The key to
Yeah.
all that is prevention, right? You want
Yeah.
to be prepared. You want to give lots of noise, let them know you're walking through their home, sharing the
Mhm.
space with them for that time. And that, because once you're face to face, things are going to change real quick.
Yeah.
So you
yeah.
always want to work on the prevention part. Right.
They will run away
Yeah.
Mhm.
unless they're used to being around humans and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not scared.
Yeah.
Not someone that's used to being around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An area that's populated.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then if they find food in your place once, they'll be back every.
They will be
time.
back. Yeah, very true.
It
We
takes
Very
gotta talk
time.
about bears one night. That would be fun. I started a
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
conversation and I haven't even talked
Yeah.
about the cub I saw last week.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Anyway, I'm gonna go because I'm gonna go and see the sunset, which is spectacular in Collingwood.
Oh,
definitely.
awesome.
That's for sure. So I will see you ladies at another of one of your presentations. I really enjoyed it, meeting all 3 of
Wonderful.
you.
It was
So,
really
thanks
nice
so
to meet
much.
you too.
Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Next time I will go live. I mean,
Oh, perfect.
on video. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Yeah, cheers. Well, I will bid you ladies adieu too, and I will bid adieu to any of the viewers that are tuning in live. And just another big, huge thank you for anyone watching. Yeah, yeah.
No, you weren't watching.
Thanks to everybody.
Well, thanks, Mandy. It was great to see you tonight.
Yeah.
Always good to talk.
Well, I'll be back down on I'll be back down south making a big travel on Friday, and yeah, we have no shortage of little goodies to do. But yeah, morel season is on right now. We should all head out and fiddleheads and morels. Everyone wants to come out.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, say good night to Maylee and Kathy for us too. It was really
Oh,
fun to
absolutely.
chat.
She's
We'll see
making
you
a
soon.
coffee for me now. We got work to do tonight.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
We're
See you
All
next.
right. Thanks,
See you
ladies.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Happy.